Of the Administration and Projects Committee. I'd like to call this morning's meeting to order. We have a quorum, although we are missing Commissioner Arnrich, and who I'm sure is probably on his way and stuck in traffic on that wonderful 680 that we're trying to cure. All right, first item on our agenda this morning is public comment. This is an opportunity for any members of our audience to comment on any items not listed on today's agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on any of those items? Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public comment period and go to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes. Any changes, corrections, or a motion for approval?
Move for approval. Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Butt. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the election of the APC chair and vice chair for 2019. Do we have any nominations?
I move for approval of Julie Here's for chair and Tom Buck vice chair. Second. Have a second.
I don't know whether that's the original rotation or not, but whatever, we'll take that and run with it. It is. I'm seeing nodding heads from staff. That's good. So are there any further nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of the nomination of Pierce for chair and Butt for vice chair for 2019, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is the consent calendar. Anything anyone wishes to pull for further discussion, or do I have a motion?
Move the consent calendar.
Second. I have a motion by Butt and a second by Geringer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. We are on to legislative update. Aren't you glad you got through traffic? That's right.
Good morning,
Turn this to Lindsay.
Chair and Commissioners. Just a friendly reminder before we dive into legislation that our Redefining Mobility Summit is tomorrow, so hopefully you'll be able to join us for all or some of the day tomorrow. And if you haven't registered yet and would like to be registered, please let us know, and we'd be happy to take care of that. You do have before you the federal legislative report, and I'm going to touch on that very briefly before I turn it over to Mark Watts, because he's got a lot to cover for you this morning. There's a lot happening on the state side, but really briefly, a few things that I wanted to point out in the federal report. One, Contra Costa County has been identified as one of the top 10 counties in the nation where trespasser fatalities or casualties occur. So we will be watching that railroad casualties. So we'll be watching that really closely to see what they do with that report, to see if there is any additional funding coming down the pipeline that can help with that situation, or some improvements to help reduce the number there. Infrastructure discussions are starting in earnest on Capitol Hill. There's a lot of talk about raising the gas tax nationally, and also potential list that we can share with our advocates and our delegation. I'll just talk a little louder while they try to figure that out. Oh, there you go. And lastly, in light of all the infrastructure discussions that are getting kicked off, we'll be planning a trip probably in late April or early May to Washington, D.C. to advocate for some of our needs and regulation reform. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or to turn it over to Mark Watts and let him brief you on what's happening at the state level.
Any questions on the federal side? It should be an interesting year, especially as gas tax discussions kick off. I'm not terribly overwhelmed with confidence that that's going to go anywhere, but anyway, thank you, Lindsay. All right, Mark, it's up to you for the state.
Thank you, Chair and board members. Just a real brief overview of what's going on in Capitol in terms of bills. As I appeared last month, we were getting close to the final date for bill introduction. The tally for the year was 2,500 new bills and a dozen and a half new constitutional amendments, plus dozens and dozens of resolutions. But with 2,600 bills basically to deal with in the next 6 months, we've got our work cut out for us. In terms of transportation agencies and the leadership in the within the administration, first, by natural statutory action, several of the members of the State Transportation Commission were facing the end of their 4-year terms. Jim Medaffer from San Diego and Carl Gardino. Thus far, the governor has reappointed Carl Gardino. Both Commissioner Arp and Commissioner Medaffer elected to resign to give the governor more flexibility to appoint somebody that they would like to see in the office. Rumors are abounding. Will Kempton's going for it. I know Celia McAdams is going for it, formerly from Placer. There's folks from Southern California, and I think LA is trying to stake out both the new positions for LA purposes. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I'm personally helping Will just I've worked off and on for 35 years for him, so see if that helps out. I'm not sure if it will or not. In addition, the Caltrans Office of Inspector General, the IG herself, was appointed by the governor to a new position. She's now the head of the Department of Human Resources. So the IG office is vacant. She did a nice job, I believe, in restructuring it. She presented overview of the restructuring at a Senate hearing last week. It looks like she's got it off and running, but it's now rudderless. So we'll see who they appoint in that position. High-speed rail has seen some changes at the top. Dan Richards did step down, and the governor has appointed Lenny Mendonça as a member. He doesn't necessarily replace the chair yet. I think that's going to take another action by the governor, but he's intended to be the chairman. And there are rumors abounding about a very odd circumstance where you have a same-party switch in gubernatorial leadership, yet people are talking about changes at the Caltrans director and changes at potentially the secretary's level. Something I'm staying far away from because there's no upside to getting anywhere near that, and I'm just hoping that common sense prevails, but we'll see. In the packet was an extra handout that were some key bills we thought we'd present before you if you have an opportunity to look at them.
It's actually in front of you on the dais.
Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. But before I dive into those bills, I just want to mention we're tracking the CASA package very closely. MTC does a nice job of posting on their legislative committee the status. Unfortunately, most of the bills are still in spot form, so there's nothing really, I don't think, to make a recommendation today. We'll be analyzing it more closely as we go forward, as will all of your hometown cities and counties. So we'll have a good handle on it by the time the bills are in correct form. There's another bill we didn't include yet because it's going to take some more understanding, and that's SB 736 by Senator Dodd. And I mention that because he does have a piece of the county. He's part of your delegation, but it's a very unusual bill. He's requiring an attendant to be present in autonomous vehicles that are being used by public transit agencies. So as I read it, it doesn't necessarily affect the pilot program unless it's being administered by a transit agency. So that's something I'm not certain of, but it could affect definitely the evolution towards use of AVs. I guess in the old days they used to call that feather bedding. I'm not sure what you would call it nowadays. So we'll be looking at that bill and coming back with some more information. And finally, before I jump into the list, there was one measure that we had been speaking about and had high hopes to see introduced, and that's the sunset extension for the sales tax authorization for a second bite at the apple. We had felt throughout the fall and into December that we had an author, and at the last moment he elected to not move forward with that legislation. So we're looking for other bills that would welcome this extension into it. We've identified an initial 20 or 25 bills that we're going to take a hard look at and then put together a strategy to go after it. So that'll remain to be discussed at a later date. Quickly moving through the bills on the list, AB 252 by Senator Assemblymember Daley from Orange County deals with the NEPA delegation, which has been authorized ever since 2006, off and on. And each time it was authorized, it had a sunset date. He is now proposing, and we know well enough how it works, let's take the sunset date off. So we're recommending a support on that measure. Mr. Frazier has legislation AB 371, and if I'm going too fast, just don't hesitate to ask a question and jump in and stop me. This measure deals with a statewide economic vitality assessment of the freight industry. So the goal is to have a better understanding of the role of freight movement in California and how well it's doing and what we can do to improve it using the tools in the transportation mobility packages. AB 1025 is Mr. Grayson's measure he introduced at the request of the county, and this deals with the Iron Horse Trail legislation. Right now it's a spot bill, so it's not really something to take before you at this point. Once the bill has been amended, we'll be coming back with an analysis of what it does and what the implications are. But I think there's a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes, so we'll see how that, I think that'll emerge in fairly good shape. Mr. Gloria has AB 1413. This takes up from where he had last session a measure to do the same thing. It does two essentially similar things. For the San Diego transit agencies, SANDAG, and a regional commission, it authorizes each of those entities to do a sales tax within their jurisdiction, not on a countywide basis, but only within their jurisdiction. So it's an interesting new approach. He also included, at the request of me and Placer County, to have a provision that would allow any self-help county to design a sub-county level tax authority under the 180,000 series. So it would be something that would be available to Bay Area and other folks, other counties around the state. AB 1475 is a measure by a new member, Bauer-Kayan, I think I pronounced it right, Bauer-Kayan, that deals with authorization for the use of CMGC. In this case, the bill is targeted at a specific bridge that has been in the code section that this resides in. That has been the tradition, just authorize one facility at a time. Initially, there had been conversations between CCTA staff, myself, and Senator Glazer's office about doing a little broader bill. We've engaged in conversations with the author's office on broadening that at some appropriate time. So broadening would mean that instead of just having it authorized project by project and entity by entity, just give RTPAs the authority to help cities and counties at their request to do any project that's off the state highway system. So that's what we're looking at. And back from the dead is AB 1568, Mr. McCarty's bill that punishes cities and counties by withholding SB1 local repair funds if housing production targets are not met. And similar to the position we recommended last year, staff is recommending oppose on this at this point in time. I would note that you probably read and understood that the governor had expressed an interest in going down this path, but has indicated when he released the budget that he would probably use a stakeholder process to get to what would be a better solution or an improved solution. So I think there's going to be a lot of work going on in this area. The next measure is AB 1633 by Mr. Grayson, and this has to do with signal optimization. Region-wide, the bill would apply only within the MTC region, and it's an attempt to improve traffic flow, but also achieve other societal goals like GHG reduction and particulate matter reduction. And we're monitoring that to see if there's any changes.
Quick question.
Yes.
It says authorize each city to do it. Why do they need authorization to do that?
I'm not certain why. I think it may be the fund source. I can definitely check into that and get back through Lindsay and get you the answer.
We're doing that already, so
Yeah.
I don't know why we need authorization to do it. But
I think he's authorizing a optimization within a specific design. So you can do what you need to do as a city under current laws. He wants to package it into a specific design with specific goals, and he wants the cities to use that design. It sounds like it's flexible, but I will give a complete report to Lindsay so she can pass it back to you.
So I guess the question is he going to require something versus allow? I mean, this sounds a little redundant to what we already have unless he's going to require some format.
Right. That's what I suspect.
Okay.
And I will get to the bottom of that.
Thank you.
The other point is maybe there's a need to carve out, you remember Prop 1B, we
Yes.
had traffic light synchronization. So if you're going to have a authorization bill, maybe have a funding source that cities can tap into to help leverage the dollars that they have in order to start or implement the process.
Right. So I've got 2 items to look at on that bill for you, Lindsay. The next measure is Assemblymember Aguirre Curry's ACA 1 that would reduce the voter approval threshold for infrastructure bonds for cities and counties to 55%. It also references in the bill taxes related to infrastructure and affordable housing, but it's not fleshed out yet. So we are recommending monitor for now until we understand what taxes would apply and what kind of projects would be subject to the taxes that would apply. So we need to get to the bottom of that, but it's not there yet. SB 127, Mr. Wiener's bill, is an interesting measure. It would create a division of active transportation. So in statute, there's several division requirements for Caltrans: planning division, modal division, project development. Now they're adding an active transportation division. And it would also go on to say that the Secretary's office should dedicate an undersecretary to overseeing this program. And the idea would be that as Caltrans prepares its asset management plan related to the SHOP program, that every project should take a look at how you could leverage an ATP project. There seems to be pieces missing, but I mean, it's easy to understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to say if you've got a series of ATP projects out here and you've got SHOP projects, are there places where they intersect, and should you be taking a look at optimizing the time that a contractor's on site to do both? So hopefully that's where he's going, and not trying to upset the apple cart in terms of the availability of funding. They do dedicate 3% of the SHOP for the planning and the project development team work, and for some of the ATP projects that would be selected to be married up with SHOP projects. It goes a step further and reorders the prioritization in statute that's been there since the 70s in terms of Caltrans funds should be spent in the following order: safety, maintenance, projects that improve mobility. He's inserting ATP at the very top of that priority system. So it's an interesting new approach, and we're asking that you allow us to monitor this until we understand if it's going to be changed or not. And finally, a nice positive bill. Hopefully it goes on consent because we're recommending support. SB 137 by Senator Dodd. There currently is the authority for cities and counties with population in excess of 200,000 to enter into exchange of federal funds with state funds to streamline the delivery projects in their communities. This simply extends it to all communities in the state. So it threw a lot of people off at first. They thought it was a brand new approach, but it just is simply extending it to the smaller communities of the state as well. So they have the advantage of streamlined delivery. and we're recommending support on that. So with that, I bring my overview of these bills to a close.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Questions, comments? Any dispute with the recommended positions? I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of these to just monitor them right now. I mean, some of the ones, particularly with the CASA compact, are literally refer to item 3 of the compact, and that's, I mean, we have no idea where they're going with some of these things, and these spot bills are just not even fleshed out at all. So, but some of these make a whole lot of sense. So, any questions, comments, or a motion, or direction, or?
No, I don't think we need a motion, do we? Huh?
Yeah,
Okay. Then I move it
as presented.
as presented.
As presented, okay.
Second. That'll be
Second.
my job today.
Okay, a motion by Taylor, second by Geringer. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark. Good luck with your traffic getting back up to Sacramento, and we will look forward to further updates from you on all of these bills, because they are breaking fast, as we can tell. All right, the next item on our agenda, we get to hear from Brian on our fiscal year 18-19 mid-year budget review. So welcome, Brian.
Good morning, Chair Pierce and Commissioners. My name is Brian Keller, the Chief Financial Officer, and today we're going to go over the mid-year budget review. Every year we start this process in January, and I work with the projects teams, the planning teams, and other members of the organization to revisit what we had presented to you in June of the prior fiscal year. As we go through it, the number one item is sales tax. We had a study done by HDL. They had projected our sales tax to remain flat. We are right on par to continue to meet our original budget, if not exceed it just a little bit. I didn't want to go ahead and increase it only because we don't know what the next 6 months of revenue is going to do, the state of the economy, and different things that are moving around. It's better to just stay the original course. Our federal, state, and local revenues shifted around a little bit. You can see that the state revenues increased about $6 million. Local revenues went down about $7.4 million. But the overall change between the original budget and the mid-year budget is about a $1.8 million decrease. The state revenues that we're seeing, we'll go into detail a little later in the presentation. The local revenues, one of the biggest pieces that's in there is the ECRFA funding on the Balfour project was reduced about $4.7 million. But then we have our investment and other income. That's an $800,000 increase. A good portion of the funding that we have in there is our bond funds. We had about $60 million at the beginning of the fiscal year that's contributed. We thought the burn rate, the draw schedule on the capital projects was going to be going a little faster, so we have a little extra income in there. Our investment policy calls for us to hold our investments anywhere from 2 to 3 years are the maximums that we have. And the way we report our financials is on market value. So now that we're getting closer to the 2 to 3 years that when we purchase some of these funds and the interest rates that are increasing, our market value is increasing, and also our investments are closer to maturity, and we're not losing any money. It's just the timing of when we receive our money, and it was time to make an adjustment there. Our bond proceeds we use on the Measure J capital projects, CIP 1 through 9. That's a decrease of about $5 million, and we'll go through that a little later. The other sources is funds that we've collected in prior years that we've earmarked for projects and delivery through the local cities as well, and those have all been adjusted through this mid-year budget, and so you can see that there's a decrease of about $20 million in there as well. Our biggest component in here is our project section. That always makes up about 60% of our budget, if not a little more. You can see that there's a change of about $25 million, and we'll go through that as well. The programs is decreasing just a little bit. The planning is staying about the same course, some adjustments based on some consultant work. The administrative section, we have about a $1 million increase. Just last month, we were in front of you for a $1.2 million payment to CalPERS. And our debt service. When we did the original budget last year, we didn't know where we were going to end up with the refinance of the $200 million fixed rate notes, and so that's an adjustment to interest expenditure in there. Sales tax, as you can see, we've started out over the last few years, some very good increases. What I did this time is I added the 2020 estimate just because I wanted to make sure that we're looking a little past just this fiscal year. So we show about a 0.3% increase for this year. There's been a lot of confusion on the allocation of the funding from the state because of, in May, they changed the way that they're paying the cities and the agencies. What they did last year is they tried to speed up the payments to the cities, and in the process, they implemented a new software system. So their inputting this stuff is a little slow, and they're not getting the money to the cities as quickly as can be. So right now, our funds are a little higher than what it should be, just because the payments that were supposed to be collected last year are rolling into this year. So your cities will be facing some issues as well. There might be a little extra income in this year that you weren't really expecting. Just make sure that you have whoever look at the adjusted point of transaction sales so that you guys can make some decisions for the next fiscal year. Here's our sales tax point of transaction sales. Up here at the top, I just wanted to show a calendar year, 2018 versus 2017. You can still see we have some very nice growth of about 5.4%. General consumer goods is the biggest piece for the authority. Autos and transportations have increased as well. And the fuel stations has increased about 13% with the increase in gas taxes and the prices there. If we take a look at just our first 6 months of this fiscal year compared to the prior year's fiscal year, we show about a 3.4% increase. One of the items I do want to point out is autos and transportation, as some of the other auto dealerships have seen a little bit of a slowing down or a little bit of a decrease. There's a automobile manufacturer out of Fremont that was behind on delivery of a lot of new cars, and that has helped boost that individual area, and that's keeping it up at about a 6% increase in there. Capital project funding, as you can see, it's about $37 million originally. We're reducing it to about $35.6 million. You can see in there that we have some shop funds increase of $3.5 million. We have state-local partnership, about $2.5 million in there that's increased. A lot of that is due to the 680 and the 684 projects. Our STIP funds is about the same. ECRFA, which we discussed, is down about 4.7. So overall, it's just a timing of the projects, not a loss of any of this funding. And our planning, congestion management, and PDA funding is going to be about $1.2 million in federal. We have our PPM, which is our state planning, programming, monitoring money, which is about $700,000. That's used to pay staff salaries for promoting and reporting on some functions of the authority. Motor vehicle registration is about $1.7 million, which is a slight increase over the prior year. State Transportation Agency grant, which is our Go Metum program, you can see that's about $1.9 million. That's to reimburse the authority for some work and to pay for some work that we're doing now as well. We also have a $270,000 contribution from Go Metum to pay for certain staff functions. Here we have the bulk of our projects, which is the Measure J Capital Project Program, which is going to be about $86.7 million. I've outlined the 9 different categories up there, and I've tried to illustrate the different funding for each one of the projects. As we go through this, we can see our RM2 funding. The bulk of it is going into the I-680 corridor. We have the STIP and the SLPP funding, which is $8.5 million for the I-680 SR4 interchange. The I-80 corridor is going to get about $4 million. And then we have the ECRA funding, which is going to help complete out the bypass there at about $8.7 million. And if we look in the bottom right-hand corner, it's about $53 million. $53 million that's left there is going to come from our bonds that we have. We started the year at about $58-60 million in there. We're going to end up with about a savings of 5 years if we go all the way out and spend all the budgeted funds. This slide here is going to go through the capital project changes. The capital project improvements is about $103 million if you include the sub-regional and countywide capital maintenance programs, and represents 47% of the total expenditures for the authority for this fiscal year. If we look at the Caldecott Tunnel, that's a $6.2 million change, and as we've discussed a little bit in the past, it's for the oversight of some ongoing costs by Caltrans, which we're going to be negotiating, and I believe that next year there might be some settlement on that piece. The BART, the rail extension, has to do with the parking lot increase there. We have some SR4 east widening, which is going to be the Balfour piece that we've made some adjustments. That would be CIP 5, I apologize, which is about in the middle. That's going to be a decrease of about $5 million to show the timing of the project out there. We have project staff here that can answer any questions if you have some questions on any of these individual projects. But the overall change is going to be about $22 million for these projects.
Hold on one second. Bob?
Yeah. Caldecott Tunnel. Caldecott Tunnel.
We'll let Tim handle that one.
Is it ever?
The perpetual project.
So there's a couple ongoing activities going. We got the landscaping, we got mitigation that's happening in Berkeley and Oakland, and so there's some things that are going to be continuing to occur until those funds run out. But the main thing that we're discussing with Caltrans is this oversight component of $5 million on the construction, and so we're negotiating with Caltrans staff in terms of how to handle that oversight with Caldecott Tunnel. That's probably the last big expenditure for Caldecott Tunnel.
At some point, it becomes their tunnel, and we don't pay for it anymore, correct?
Yeah, this is all part of the closeout process.
Okay.
My question with the $5 million, do we have any type of leverage to say it's enough, guys? I mean, how do we get rid of it? Do they sign off on this?
So technically right now, the co-op agreement with Caltrans for construction has actually expired. And so right now we have no obligation to actually pay the $5 million. And so we are, and really the issue is for Caltrans, because Caltrans has to make up the difference with their headquarters accounting. And so we were negotiating with Caltrans District 4 in terms of potentially combining projects, in terms of getting additional funds in order to pay the $5 million if we want to do something like that. But we're still negotiating that with Caltrans.
To add a little bit to this discussion, the first thing that we're asking is an accounting for where the $5 million was spent. So if the oversight was spent on bores 1, 2, and 3, our mission was to bore a hole from Contra Costa to Oakland on the right side of bore 3. It wasn't to add all this extra stuff into the other three bores. So they're doing a cost accounting of what that situation is. The co-op has expired, but they haven't closed the project out. And so it's not District 4 that's trying to close the project out, it's headquarters. So headquarters is calling the district to say, there's a $5 million hole, how do we fill that hole? So there's a number of ways of doing that. So there's the way we just pay, or we negotiate a funding agreement, maybe get some dollars on a project in the future from another funding source that may eclipse the amount of money that we are talking about here today. So those negotiations are in play. Bottom line is there's no co-op. It expired. We get fed back. You sign the co-op. That's the reason why you have to do these 97 things. And so today we're saying we don't have a co-op, so there's one thing that we don't have to do. But It's not in the spirit of being a good partner. That's the issue for us as staff, is, we want to be an owner of choice. We want to be a partner of choice. We want to be an employer of choice. And that's the hard part for us.
So we're trying to leverage this bill that Caltrans has to get something somewhere else,
Yes, ma'am.
if possible. That makes sense. Keep at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. And through this whole process and going through all these projects and programs, and I was looking at some of my notes this morning, there's about 400 individual line items that make up this on all the worksheets that I do with Susan and Hisham and Ivan and the CIP team, and it boils down to probably about 125 individual projects that make up part of this. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, so thank you. The administration is about $3.4 million. That's an increase of about 1.1. We discussed that it was a $1.2 million payment to CalPERS. The salary and benefits for the administration part, our time allocated to that piece of the authority is about 0.72%, which falls below the 1% limitation. And also in the administration, we had a decrease of about $90,000 as I removed prior budgeted furniture and equipment upgrade that we had for the authority. And our authority-wide pension, post-employment health insurance, and worker comp rates are slightly decreased in this budget year due to some vacant positions we had within this fiscal year. The programs department has about $62 million in expenditure. There's a decrease from the original budget of about 1.3. But I also included this year, there's about a $2 million payment to the ferry service, which is new. And we also make payments to the bus, the TLC, the pet. Thank you. And then we also have some reduced to the GoMetum. We reduced about $400,000 in expenditures for this year. The planning department, we saw a slight decrease of $162,000. That's all based to the current commitments and contracts we have to get some of our deliverables done. The debt service, we've seen an increase or decrease of about $1.3 million. Again, that is due to the refinance of the bond and that we did in August. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Any questions of Brian? Very comprehensive report, thank you. And it was understandable to people who are not CPAs, which is very helpful, I think. So any questions, comments, or a motion? We would need a motion to forward Resolution 1831 to the full board.
I move that we forward this with recommendations for approval to the full board.
Very good.
Second.
First by Butt, second by Geringer. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Brian. I would suggest in our budget we add a new connection for the main mic, seeing as it seems to fall out of its socket several times per meeting. Well, you know, it's important to running our meetings that we have that working. Okay, we are on to item number 10, which is State Route 239, and we will get a report on that from Susan Miller.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chair Pierce. I'm very happy to be here this morning to present this item on State Route 239 as we initiate the next phase of work, which would be environmental documentation, or in the Caltrans language, it's called PAED, or Project Approval and Environmental Documentation. So I have a very brief PowerPoint I'm going to go over to provide some background and to talk a little bit about the steps moving forward and a schedule. So to remind you, State Route 239 is a proposed project which would link Highway 4 in Brentwood to Interstate 205 or 580 just west of Tracy in San Joaquin County. Right now, Highway 4 really provides the only main connection, freeway connection to East County. So As State Route 239 would provide a much-needed second link that would provide access to the south. A second link would provide some access for development, for jobs, for supporting goods movement, and also to provide some emergency response should you have a major incident on Highway 4. It would provide an avenue or mechanism for traffic to exit East County. So it's a very important link, a missing link, if you will. The project history, back in 1959, State Route 239 was adopted by the legislature, but nothing was constructed, so nothing really moved forward. But then in 2005, the county was able to obtain a $14 million federal earmark. In 2010, the county transferred that earmark and the project to the authority. We embarked on a feasibility study in 2011. That study was completed in 2014, and then much of that information was transferred, and we started what's called a project study report and project development support document, again, Caltrans language, for their first official step in how they develop a project and move forward. So the PSR PDS was completed in 2015, and then we went through a closeout process to close out that portion of the federal grant money that we utilized for the PSR PDS and for the feasibility study. There's a lot of lines on this graph, so the main focus I want you to consider is that it's very much still peak oriented in that people are exiting East County for jobs. And so you'll see the peak moment, if you will, the peak period is in going southbound in the morning and eastbound direction, headed down towards 580. And then the reverse in the PM peak coming back northbound and westbound. So it's still pretty much a lot of people leaving for jobs. So what other information did the project study report go through? Well, the document was provided. The project's a very large project. You'll see from the next slide where I'm going to talk about how much it costs. But it focused on looking at it in 5 segments, if you will, breaking up the whole route into 5 segments. And we used this strategy very successfully in Highway 4. As funding became available, we were able to put funding sources together to figure out how we were going to acquire right-of-way and move to construction. And then we were able to look at doing the project in segments, having environmental clearance and proceeding in segments. So the important thing to remember is that each segment, if we want to proceed with that segment, has to have what's called independent utility. So that'll be something that we'll look at in the environmental process as we set up looking globally in a programmatic large document. Do we have a segment we can proceed forward with that has independent utility, and then we can pursue funds to hopefully achieve going through design and construction. In the study, it looked at the North Link, which had 2 alternatives that pretty much covered the boundaries at the airport. Either it came in east of the airport or west of the airport. And then it focused on what was called in the project, the PSR PDS, the airport connector, we're now calling Byron Vasco connector. And we do have a large focus that we're going to be looking on. You'll see again on the funding slide, we do have some set aside funds for that specific connection. So we're thinking that that might be the best to move forward as an initial phase of work. And we're working very closely with the county actually on the entire document, and then especially on looking at the Byron Vasco connector. At 580, the document looked at 3 different alternatives, how it came into the 580-205 system. A lot of it was in the same vicinity as on 205, but there were some variations in the different alternatives. And then there was also included a South Link transit, which went to Mountain House. That could be an extension of the BART system or eBART system. It could be connections with ACE or Express Bus systems. It just kind of covered what would be the possibilities. And then there was also a look at bicycle and ped facilities in the PSR document. So we'll carry those forward and continue to look at those in the environmental process. So I mentioned there's a big price tag, about $1.5 billion. That's escalated dollars to 2025, and we are very short. As you can see, we have committed funding of $28 million. We do have the federal earmark. There's around $10 million remaining, and that's what we're going to be utilizing to move forward. The county actually is our close partner. They are providing the match for the federal grant, so we're working very closely and teaming with the county on this project. And then there is a set aside in Regional Measure 3, and that is very specific to the Byron Vasco connector. So those dollars we're thinking would be a good funding source once we complete environmental to move forward to right-of-way acquisition and design work for the connector while we seek funding. Again, this process of being ready has, we've had great success in leveraging dollars and attracting other funds, doing this kind of phased approach, because we can say that we're shovel ready if we've gone through the environmental process, which is one of the more difficult steps. So the actions we'll be asking that will be coming your way. Today we are asking, staff is asking for authorization for the chair to execute this co-op agreement 90.50.02 with Caltrans to provide oversight. We are not reimbursing Caltrans for oversight in this instance, but they do need an official co-op agreement in place so they can participate in the process and open up, a charge number, if you will, so they can staff and plan their staffing for the project. So this is a very important step. We will be looking at the current memorandum of understanding that we have with the county. We'll probably need to come back and modify that to increase the dollars in that agreement and to more explicitly talk about the environmental process. And then we may come back amending this co-op agreement. We're looking at possibility of teaming with Caltrans. Could they provide some resources to do some of the work? In that instance, we would reimburse them for the work. We're in those conversations right now. We've done that in the past. It's been very successful. If we pick specifically who we would like to work on the project and what department we would like and what their expertise is, and again, can they staff the job? Can they do it in the time frame that we would like them to do it? So we're in conversations with that right now. And then we'll be working on a request for proposal for the consultant to hire to do the overall environmental document, and then we'll be coming back with an award. So here's this tentative schedule today with the co-op agreement, and then coming back very soon probably with an amendment to the county agreement. We will be doing all the very necessary paperwork to obligate the federal funds. We'll be working on that this spring. And then we'll go through the process in the summer of releasing the RFP and getting a consultant on board, so we feel we'll be able to start in the fall the actual environmental process. Anticipate that could be complete by 2023, and then we would begin looking at design for our first phase project and some right-of-way activity and right-of-way acquisition. And if we could find the funding at that juncture, we would then be able to start something, potentially the airport connector or the Byron Vasco connector. I'm getting used to the new name, sometime in 2025. So that's our plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Bob?
Yeah, I guess just a couple of questions in the sense of working with the county. Hopefully our county is obviously supporting this. This has been in the works since I was born. And the other issue is that how will this all tie in with Alameda County? Because once you cross those lines, obviously, how does that work?
Yes. Well, let me answer first, working with our county. We're heavily engaged. In fact, I consider the county as our partner, almost technically our client, because if we do that first phase, the county is providing, they would own that facility and do the maintenance on it until the whole connector is built. So we're working very closely with county staff. We've had numerous meetings. They've come with us to the Caltrans meetings, so they're very heavily involved and extremely supportive.
Because they own the airport.
They do, and we've met with the group. Actually, they have a study coming out about the airport, And we have met with that group, and we've also met with the Habitat Conservation Program staff, because that will be a very important aspect for environmental. There's a lot of species out there, as you can imagine, in the open area. So we've had some great initial planning meetings already with county staff and with their various departments. So that's going very well. Alameda, they're very concerned about more traffic on 580. So we will have to work closely with them when we look at that connection vantage point. How is that going to play in, and what are we going to do to that would be acceptable to them? I have noticed in the existing document, and Alameda was involved in the PSR process, that the connections seem to come in at 205. So that is something we'll have to very carefully look at and work with Alameda.
But a comment on that is also, we would take some traffic off that, right?
We'll have to make them comfortable proving that there's no negative implication for traffic in Alameda County on what we're proposing.
If anything,
but there is growth.
We should relieve some congestion off that corridor of its own self.
Particularly if there's a link to the ACE train.
Yes.
Yes.
Randy?
Exactly.
So this started out as a county project, and it was in 2010. I met with, or after I got hired, actually, I met with Julie Buren, and they turned the project over to us. So they get the allocation of federal money. There's 2 earmarks from then Congressman Pombo.
Right, Pombo.
And the focus was freeway or some widening of Vasco and or Byron. And the county thought that we were probably better to lead that effort. So we're really a client of the county. And so much like if we build and oversee the design and construction of a bridge over Bollinger Road for the city of San Ramon, it's much like the same arrangement. So we are in lockstep with the county. And that's why the name has changed, because they wanted to change the name. As far as the study is concerned, it's actually a 3-county study. It includes San Joaquin. So the idea was to open up the access to the Central Valley through the TriLink model. And it shows that not only car traffic, but truck traffic, some of it will be diverted off onto 580 and circulate through Highway 4 because of the improvements, and then back up onto 80 and then back northbound. So there's some options there as well. But the study has been done. I think in your case, in the environmental, we'll redo some of those models to show some of the diversion of traffic off of 580 and how it's going to partner very well. And Commissioner Pierce knows, because we had to go talk to the county supervisor in Alameda many times that is in this area, because they have a gateway policy. And so we try not to impact their gateway policy, but show that it's going to help the region with circulation and improve it, actually.
Okay, I have one request. I would love to see particularly the maps, but the whole document, if we could. The maps are very, very small in the PowerPoint and very hard to read and understand. They're rather faint, so I couldn't tell you what the options were if I were looking just at that map. So if we had the document, if you can just send us the link to that, that would be great, so that we can be a little more educated when we do run into our colleagues in adjacent counties. Okay, any other questions?
I move the item.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Taylor and a second by Butt to authorize the execution of the co-op agreement. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is correspondence and news clippings, and then followed by commissioner and staff comments. I have no comments or reports. Do we have any comments from the other commissioners? If not, executive staff comments? Anybody got a report? You're debating. Okay, you're good. All right, is there any other business to bring before the board? If not, we are adjourned to our next meeting on Thursday, April 4th. And we will see you at the board meeting. Thank you all.